This call is now being recorded.
All right. It is the first week of February, and that means the Motherlode, 100 plus women who made hip hop, was just released February 2nd by author Clover with beautiful illustrations by Rachel Baker. I'm excited to have Clover here, a dear friend of mine, but always been a huge fan of her work. So Clovito, thank you for chatting with me today.
Thank you, of course. Yes, I had to talk to Jayson. So way back to, like internship days.
Yeah, I looked that up earlier today, 2003 is when we met.
Oh my God, yeah.
At Vibe. I dubbed you Clovito if I could take any type of credit.
Yeah.
But what I do remember back, go ahead.
No, I was going to say, like, the first published thing, like, I worked on was that magazine the intern magazine. Like, putting together a published piece of, or like a print, thing. Yeah. Yeah, no, I think the benefits of having, like, a tangible thing to kind of produce against is meaningful, really get your work tighter, which you've done to an infinite degree with the book. Which is crazy. I have a lot of friends who've done books and peers who've done books, but this is like one of the more prideful, if not most prideful, one that I have in my bookcase. I just remember meeting you, and you were so observant, and I remember being like, "Yeah, you're gonna be like a hip hop Joan Didion, just like in the cut, like observing everything." And I think it's interesting that your book, like, back then when we were interns, like the idea of doing a book this broad, somebody would have been like, no, it's too broad. It's too broad. But I think it's such a you thing to kind of take something with this scope, but then do really interesting things with the execution, to make it, tangible and in this product. Which leads me to my first question I wanted to ask you. What was the book that you actually set out to write? And throughout the process, how did it instead become the Motherlode as it's been published? Yeah, that is the perfect first question, because I really started out, it didn't start out this, expansive, or at least like kind of like in the germination phase, it was more like, okay, I want to do profiles of women. That was like in the most basic sense. It was just like, I wanted to like just do more so write around profiles of like at least 50 women. My the blurb that was like in Publishers Week, whatever that, the write up about it was like 63, I think, like somewhere more close to like 50, 60 women. And the book I was gonna write, or just kind of initially had in mind, was just okay, here's like essays, like on why each woman was impactful, and it was just supposed to be essays from my point of view. But I kind of I don't know, I'm like a research, I just like doing deep dives of things. So the more research I did and the more I kind of like spoke to the women, I realized sort of like dreadfully that I was gonna have to actually track down and speak to more women than I had like originally planned. Like I started out speaking, like I interviewed Mercedes Ladies. That was one of the first like series of interviews, and like Medusa, and like when I talked to them, I was kind of like, I'm getting so much information from them that's not available and like not online. Like it's, and maybe like in some page 37 of like some 1990 edition of the source in some way, but that's not online. And so I was like, I need to actually use this information. I need to like speak to the women to get these stories. It can't just be me like waxing poetic about like, why they're important. Like I want them to like weave their own way into the story and like tell their stories, and I guess just me kind of being the vessel for it. So that's how it changed. Like originally it was like, I'm going to write about these women, and it kind of turned into like them writing about themselves in a way, like them kind of leading the narrative. Like when I talked to Talia Baltimore, like she wanted to talk about writing and like
how she was a writer, and like so I let that kind of steer. I let her like steer the conversation and turn that entry into like her talking about how Biggie like coached her on like, you know, writing, or just wanted her to, you know, encourage her to like write every day. Not that he was writing for her, that he encouraged her.
He cheerleaded her more than coached her.
Right, exactly. Like he cheerleaded her and like encouraged her to write every day, and like that, and you know, kind of flex her writing muscle in that way. So these are like, you know, like I kind of tried to steer in the direction that they wanted to kind of go in, without like sacrificing. Obviously, I wouldn't make it, you know, fluff or like it was. It ended up being like compelling, basically. And so that changed kind of like the trajectory. Like the more interviews I did, the more I was just like, all right, I'm gonna have to do like as told tos, because I hadn't really planned on doing like as told tos in the book, whereas, you know, I hadn't planned on doing, you know, interviews with so many secondaries and like stylists and like directors and things like that, and that just kind of happened because I wanted it to be thorough, and then I'm like crazy, so I was like, I was kind of like, if I write about a meal, I got to interview Just Blaze, even if I can't get a meal. So I wanted to get at least one person for each entry, even if I didn't get the artist, like one person who could tell me something new, basically, about them.
Yeah, and that's interesting. There's still sort of there is still a really definitive backbone to the arc of what you're telling, even though you know, you allowed them to lead some of the conversations. What I thought was particularly interesting, you know, you were gracious to release 3 excerpts ahead of the book's release on Queen Latifah, Lil Kim, and Cardi B, and the combined arc of those establishes, you know, the formative criticisms for women as rappers, but also the breakthroughs, you know, from the binary perception, you know, either a righteous artist or you sell sex, to the first lady template, and, you know, and sort of that gatekeeper syndrome. I wanted to touch on all 3, but first I wanted to go into the idea of the binary, good girl, bad girl, or righteous self-sex, is that how you described it in the essay, and how historically that, you know, limited women's participation as performers. You know, how for you, how has that concept been the most detrimental, if you even think it's the most detrimental?
Yeah, I think I guess that was a conversation I got into through Joan Morgan, and like when she wrote about it in When Chicken Had Come Home to Roost, and just kind of like the, you know, these, you could be one way or the other, you know, like, and we had to kind of have, the thing is that you have to see both examples to like introduce that binary. So like Kim and Foxy would be the ones to like even introduce that binary and cut, I don't know, just have I guess like introduce the fork in the road, basically, where you could go like their way, or like the women before them who were more like, you know, Queen Latifah, and like they weren't kind of like very bluntly selling sex, even though they were like sexy, you know, like Salt and Pepper was sexy. So, you know, I think detrimental, it has been, you know, limiting, like, you know, because it's basically like if you want to be a bigger artist or like a commercial artist, or you just want to like make money and, you know, have a career as a creative performer, as a woman in rap, like, yeah, like it was that direction of, you know, Foxy and Kim, of like kind of having that image, and like Soleil talks about it, Lady Luck talks about it, Nonchalant, everyone from like Nonchalant, they had one song and she was like, yeah, you know, like that kind of like binary was definitely introduced. It was like, well, if you dress this way, then you should sound this way. So like it all has to kind of like match, where like it's not like you, like the women could dress like more tomboy but then be sounding feminine, you know, or be sounding like it was, you know, with Jabrat, like tomboy, and like she was like talking about pimping and like all that. So, you know, I think in that way it was kind of like, if you did want to like blow up, or, you know, or the women that did get the platform, it was like, you know, one way or the other. And, you know, I mean, Lauryn Hill, I guess, like kind of maybe, I don't know, like, maybe like the Lawrence and the Missy kind of like started to maybe steer in a different direction, or like introduce different ideas or different kind of like possibilities. Yeah. Where Missy was like, okay, we could also be weird. And so I think like just gradually it was like, oh, women are different things, like just over these years. And now we have many examples of like many different shades, but it feels like that unfolded over like so many years, in comparison to like the guys, where you had Missy's like eccentricity, but then like who came out, like it's like years before like Nicki kind of embodied like all of those things. She was like eccentric and weird and like sexy and loud and like lyrical, and I mean obviously like she changed everything. And then, you know, Cardi is like, so it's just like this, you know, just literally like the evolution of man chart, and like, but for women. And, you know, I just think, you know, the binary was, you know, it still exists because it's still hard for, if you don't look a certain way, to be popular on like a large scale. But there's more just shades, I guess, if that makes sense, or different, like, you know, the Tierra Whack and Rico Nasty and like No Name being able to have like their own fan bases. And then Megan and Cardi being like, and Saweetie being like the new, you know, I guess trio of, I don't know, I guess vanguards or whatever. But that, I mean, I do think, you know, maybe like a young MA would have a different type of popularity or be like more popular. Like it, like if she was a different type of artist or whatever, or like a more kind of like a Cardi type of artist, you know, but it's really just interesting how these things, the trends still kind of like exist or whatever.
Yeah.
That was set up like in the 90s.
Right. You, so I still want to stick with the three excerpts, but you mentioned Young May's name, and I you know, I noticed that there wasn't much ink on her in the book. You know, I'm sure there's some, you know, reporting or narrative reason, or, you know, I mean, this is a lot of backtracking historically, and, you know, the end kind of just it literally ends with the future. But I'm curious just of the choice to not kind of go deep into her uniqueness as an artist.
Right. Yeah. Then now there was definitely like an intentional choice to cut it off at Cardi, because it feels like there's a like new, like there's like a post Cardi generation like cropping up. Mm-hmm. And so that's like volume 2 of this book, you know, sort of, where like they get, and this is kind of like the, you know, for you to understand like what's happening now. Here's like kind of everything leading up to what's happening now. And like, you know, I was kind of like, okay, should I do, you know, entries on the, you know, like Lizzo and like 2 pages on Saweetie, but it just felt like I wanted to just kind of have a definitive sort of ending to the to like what felt like to the story I was like, I guess, like setting up, which is that, you know, what's happening now and like this kind of like volume of women is possible because of like everything that came before. So and
then as a note to anybody who's listening or for reading, you know, in the end there is a shout out section where you have a bunch of music journalists who are shouting out, you know, the volume. I like that word, it's sort of like the volume generation, because there's so many. And you did blurb about Young M.A. I wanted to ask you, so the Lil Kim essay is among the most important in the book, obviously for personal reason to you. You call it Hardcore, you know, the perfect album, or your perfect album in your essence interview. Karen Good, who you quoted in the piece, said, you know, Kim took lumps that later acts wouldn't have to as a result. And then, you know, you characterize her as a sacrificial lamb of sorts.
Right.
I wanted to get into that and you know, from her experience and the way that you write about it, would you note her, say, you know, she's obviously she's one of the most important figures in women's history
Right.
of hip hop, but is she the most important figure?
Like from the beginning of the book, that was my stance. Yeah, that I knew the Lil Kim entry was going to be the longest. I knew it was going to be like a kind of defining moment in like the history of women. It's in the like middle of the book. I knew that it was for me that she was like my kind of like seminal artist as far as like I really got into hip hop through like the like DMX's and like Missy and Salt and Peppa. Like I knew about them, but Kim was like wow. Like I just was like transfixed by Lil Kim, and like I do think that there's a story of the like women's experience in rap can like just be seen and told through her, like just the whole like the kind of exploitation and then like trying to feel like you're in control and like it's like not like she's she wants to like present this image. It's not like somebody's like forcing her to like be a certain way. So there's this play of like her wanting to be it and then also being like pushed to the stage, pushed like to the center of the stage in that way. And I think that's just really interesting, just like having to even like, have that, like not feel like it's completely your decision, which is different from today. Like there's that, and then there's, just her style and like introducing all this like luxury and into hip hop, in a different way than the guys did. Like there's just so many stories like happening through her about like black women and like imagery and like, just showing off, like being, provocative through music. There's, through her like sort of like the history of like, Bessie Smith and like all of that and Josephine Baker. And you can see like I felt like she was definitely like the turning point. I mean, that's not like, I don't think it's like sensational to say.
Right.
But yeah, I think she is the, for me, yeah, she is like the one, like the really important figure for women. Like the most.
No, she's amazing. I was a producer on the Bad Boy documentary, the Can't Stop Won't Stop.
Oh man.
And I was at the rehearsal in Pennsylvania, and when I walked in, I think the Lots were rehearsing, and then she might have been up next, and she was so good, like just her flow, delivery, dancing and performing, and then like like everybody started turning and watching her, and then the Lots were done, like they turn around and start creeping closer to the stage. Yeah, and just her command is just incredible.
Yeah,
her trailblazing. In spite of it being trailblazing, it's still probably more underrated, and it's getting credit.
Right. Yeah, I feel like hardcore should be talked about more. I don't know, like for me that is like a perfect album. I love that album, and I know there's so much of like Biggie's footprint on it, like his, or I guess more of like the way he kind of like wanted her to rap, or like those little pockets and stuff. But like she was, writing, and she like, as like the producer said, like she was writing and she was kind of, sounding like that, like that's her voice, and she knows how to perform and like bring it out. I feel like, I don't think I got to see her perform. If I did, it was like part of this. Oh yeah, I probably saw her like when like Diddy brought her out for something or whatever.
Right.
But
no,
I've never seen like a solo.
Yeah. It feels amazing. I mean, even after hardcore, despite not achieving the highs of her debut, her subsequent work, proved it for her. You know what I mean? Like she had hits, and she sneered and called out men and beefed like with rappers like Shine and Leggy and Mafia, et cetera. She made her moves.
Right.
Speaking of music, you have this great playlist that you put out on Twitter that was informed by the book. I loved it because it reminded me of so much history that I've forgotten over time. Because we're constantly chasing new records. But like listening to like
Hurricane G and be like, oh man, Minnie Scott sounds so much like her, or just remembering how dope Entice was, or like the Katie Got Dance moment. There was a lot of talent that just never got their due, or they were ahead of their time. Whether it's like the Tink, Kid Sister, Miss Dynamite was a favorite of mine. Krayshawn was probably ahead of her time. I think BET's No Limit Chronicles last year really gave me an X for flowers by incorporating her importance to the A&R of the label. But I'm long-winded to kind of say, who for you are some of your favorites that were overlooked, that you got an appreciation for through this book? Or who do you think would have fared better, now, considering all the research you did?
That is a great question. Just thinking about, I don't know, like, the first, it's kind of when, I don't know about fared better. I guess I think more of, like, the younger artists. So, like, I'm just flipping through now. I think, I thought about Yo-Yo, just because, like, she had, like, I feel like she could have had more records that were, like, huge. Like, she had, like, her first and then kind of sort of, like, like, I guess what's the word for it? Down, like, petered out or whatever, and that she could have had a more, like, consistency, that, like, she could have had, like, sort of more consistently great records and, like, kind of, maybe that doesn't sound good, consistently popular, like, you know what I mean, like, massive kind of records, for, like, her, for, like, that West Coast style. Who would be, like, if you take them out and put them in, like, 2021, Bitches with Problems would probably be dope. Lady of Rage, I definitely, like, gained appreciation for her and, like, just her kind of, because some of these, like, talking to these women, like, I could just kind of hear the sadness, or, like, regret, sadness, whatever, or lost potential, I think, like, in their voice of, like, how, what could have been, I guess. And I heard that most in, like, when I talked to her, just that, she had this opportunity when Death Row was, like, at its height and, like, what kind of could have been with her. And I can see someone like her, like, flourishing now, especially with Afropuff. Nicki D, I went back, I hadn't actually listened to that album. She was the first, like, female rapper on Def Jam. And I was like, this is a dope album. And, like, I never listened to that album. And, like, so with people like that, I just kind of gained an appreciation for it. And I kind of could see it, like, her, like, at that, like, just kind of coming out with that, like, really powerful, voice right now. And she had, like, a lot of kind of, like, what would be just, like, feminist anthems right now, basically. So.
Yeah. No, it's interesting.
I think those, And Type was a good one, too.
Oh, yeah, and Type was dope. I love the chapter, or the kind of coda on her. It's interesting because, like, when you're talking about Yo-Yo and you say, like, that consistency, it's not a reflection on them. These women were often placed in situations where, like, the machinations of the label or just the chaos of, like, the male's, like, toxicity, just didn't
that,
provide
like, rubbing off
for them, to keep, like, momentum of any kind from developing. And you said, like, in hearing from these women, that regret. A lot of these tales in the book, I think you do a good job of keeping the tone positive or decidedly measured. But, when you start reading them back to back to back, you can kind of feel all these false starts and, like you said, regrets or they're regrets, but as the reader, it's just heartbreaking, And just, on a big picture level, as you're putting it together and starting to see that overlap, what was, I guess it's on a personal level as a woman, just like reading this over and over and over again, how did that affect you?
Yeah. Even going back to, like, JJ Sad and, like, them having to deal with, like, the, like, just the whole, like, sellout argument. And like that kind of was a new feeling to me because I hadn't, I just liked that song and I was like, how I didn't see that part of it, like when the song was like popping or whatever. Because I was like too young to even understand any of like the, like you said, like the machinations of the industry. I was just seeing the artists, and so being on the other side and then interviewing them, it was a different feeling of like knowing, just like kind of knowing how the industry works, and just like it I could kind of like see, I think I'm glad you said that, like feeling, because I could feel it, and I think I wanted people to just read it and feel it, and not for me to kind of spell out too much. Like more wanted to have a balance of like showing and versus like telling like the sob story, and so that was because you can hear it, you can like kind of tell in their quotes and like. So, it's a balance to kind of like, get that feeling across without, being too like explicit, but then being, like making sure that it's kind of clear. But yeah, that feeling, I kind of just like, it made me realize just how, the kinship, I guess, like between just being a woman journalist in hip hop and being the artist, and how we're all kind of like part of the same. We're all kind of like part of that same kind of industry web, and that's when I kind of added the ludicrous part in the intro that ends the intro. Right. Like it took me back, which is funny that you asked, because that is why I added it, because I had this feeling of like this feeling like the connection to the artist, and then I was like. Yeah, like it's the same thing that, just working at like all male publications, that you could have just as a writer, like in hip hop, just as a woman writing in hip hop. And I just remembered that ludicrous moment, like when I interviewed him for XXL, and he was just like surprised that I knew about hip hop. And I was like, obviously, I mean, it's like, oh, what does this girl know about hip hop? And then it was like just, that basically that feeling made me tie it to the whole idea of being nice for a girl, and like that starts from a place of like expectations, or like low expectations, like they're like you're starting from a place of like you're seeing this woman rap, like she can't possibly be that great, like or Foxy, like you see her, it's like oh, she's pretty, but like wow, she can actually rap, and like just that is the reason that is happening is because of the low expectation. And so I just kind of related to that, and that the more that I talked to the women, the more I kind of was like just relating to them in that way. And, it just kind of like really just kind of, I guess just kind of like close the circle in a little bit, like in a way, of like how we have similar experiences.
You mentioned low expectations, and as a hurdle, and I think Cardi B probably weaponizes that idea better than anybody, and is going to defy things. In the book, you argue that she, along with the talent, she came along at the right moment as social media was empowering folks and allowed them to bypass gatekeepers. She's notable in that she's not a first lady of any label, nor is she a part of a crew. And you describe WAP as sort of a peak moment in history for women in hip hop. How do you weigh sort of her influence? Because in some ways it's still developing, and I think you kind of characterize her as kind of this endpoint. But then, with Nicki, and I don't say this to pit like a Cardi and Nicki, I'm just their influences, because you call Nicki a blueprint of sorts. And you say it with such a reference of what she established. And I think you put the context of historically what she did, right? Like by 2010, I think you noted there was like 3 women artists who were rappers who were signed to labels, amongst an all-time low. But it's their combination of how they each rewrote the rules that sort of helped this volume era that we're in. It's not necessarily yin and yang, but for comparative sake with their contributions, can you kind of add some context or go a little bit further into how the existence of each of them kind of resulted into the future, as you dubbed it in the final chapter?
Yeah. I think people use that memes like so and so walks, so blah 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 could fly. Like like that's like it's like such a stupid like silly thing, but in a way like that is what's sort of happening on like and I think things that happened with them just in a very like a shorter period of time. Like, cause it was like years between like the mid 2000s when there were like, like the Shauna's, Eve, like, Trina popping, Remy Ma, and then like Nicki Minaj being like actually on the charts. And then it was like Nicki and then pretty quickly Azealia Banks, and then cause I would throw her in there also. And then pretty quickly Cardi B. And it was like it was almost like this, what is that, EKG line where it's like flatlined and then it's like all of a sudden life kind of with these three, and they were different, but really, they're all like, all three of those are different, but they each kind of like added to the previous, like in terms of like a blueprint, like Nicki Minaj being like eccentric, like lyrical fashionista. Azealia Banks is like this adds this element of like unpredictability, but she's like less sellable as an artist. And then Cardi B is like all of those things. She's like unpredictable and like funny and loud and brash and social, and maybe not so much like the lyrical aspect, but she makes music that is like many of the songs she puts out become hits. So, like she's like basically, like hit maker. And I think the thing is that they, like in succession, you can see how, they just kind of responding to the success of Nicki, is possible. A lot because it's just so much faster. Like everything just moves so fast, and I think that that evolution is a reflection of just how fast things are moving. Just the fact that we could go from like Nicki, Azealia, Cardi in like a few years, and then to now have Saweetie and Lizzo and Megan and like all these. And then Megan came, like, it was like, wow. And it felt like a rush, like literally. And I think that's, it really is like a testament probably to the speed of social media and them just like really being savvy about like how to like use use success of the, people know what made Nicki Minaj popular. Like she made like pop songs and, like kind of taking that and, she used fashion a lot, and basically, like I think they just knew the elements, and they kind of was like, all right, I'm going to do this, and they just also could control it so much easier. So it's like Cardi just put out videos, like there was no person telling her like don't put that video out because blah blah blah, or let's have a strategy of how you release each of these Instagram clips, so it was her just kind of setting that up. So, I think you could just definitely see how like in succession, they really, it's a weird way like that kind of set up a new, like this kind of volume. And then this new, like all of that is also just really, like none of it would happen if it wasn't like the Lil Kim or if that kind of era didn't happen where they could kind of, even like the feminist kind of like philosophy of Salt and Pepper is reflected in Nicki Minaj, and like all those like things come back. I guess what is it? History repeats itself. And I think that just happened like seemed quickly to me, maybe because
I think it even seemed even from the outside looking. I think it seemed quickly for Nicki too. Like I wrote this piece for NBC News a couple of years ago, and you know they asked me to kind of do an opinion piece on Nicki and Cardi, and I wanted to make it less verse and more like and the connection between.
Right.
But you know the difference is obviously like although it's in quick succession, like you said. For us, it's also quick succession for them, and you know I think that really put Nicki on her heels. That she quickly was, you know, the fire starter to then being attached to this lineage of history, right? And
right.
This is me being armchair analyst, but like you know struggling with like the direct line from Kim to her, but then also like you know suddenly she's a legacy artist and a current artist at the same time.
It's really interesting.
I can imagine how weird that is.
Yeah. I hadn't even like thought about that. Just that kind of burden of being in, because in a way she is. I mean, one thing I didn't realize like when because I spoke to a few of the like Rico and like you know the Megan for stories and like them considering like Nicki to be like their you know like that is their blueprint like and if you think about that that's just such a weird thing for me to like realize. Like as much as we see Lil Kim as like obviously like Nicki had some influence, or took some influence from her, like they're taking Nicki's influence and like she has to, and so she is that kind of middle point of now and then basically, which is, something to, that's really interesting.
Something to consider, The Cardi excerpt was published on Jezebel, you know, your former place of employment. And it was interesting reading the comments underneath the piece because it turned into this conversation. so it turned into this conversation about less about Cardi and more about Jezebel and this confusion that the audience members are saying like, are you championing her or do you guys criticize her? And you know, and aside from the idea that you can do both, and it made me think about like the media's impact in shaping the narrative about women in hip hop. You know, you mentioned the Lil Kim and Foxy cover of The Source, and that cover line that asked harlots or heroines. That I don't know if that aged well. But what are your thoughts on the media and you know and I say that to say like for a long time there was this idea of an allotment of one woman rapper at a time, and I don't know if I want to lay that entirely at the hands or the feet of the media, but I also feel like the media carried on with the idea of the first lady of a crew. So you know what are your thoughts about the media's cause and amplifying some of the ails or curing it as you've kind of seen part of your career and the research with the Motherlode?
Yeah, and I guess there's a difference between like because like the mainstream media, because I write about that like in the intro, like how like just the way female rappers are coming into this game and dominating, and like it was just kind of a weird tone that like newspapers and like mainstream media took that was different from hip hop, which was interesting to note. And so there's that, and then like kind of I think hip hop, I mean obviously like it's a competitive industry and culture, so like I wonder how much people didn't realize what they were doing and kind of setting up the women like as you know, in like that, like beefing all the time, if they just kind of was like, oh yeah, like this is just kind of part of hip hop. But then there is like there's no way, because people enjoy like the cat fight aspect. Like there's a separate word for women who fight, like cat fight. So I think like people enjoy just seeing two women go at it, like in beef. And so there's that, and I do see how like hip hop media kind of like amplified it and, you know, it's just like, you know, the hype man, I guess, played hype man in a way. It was just like, yeah, like, but I don't know. Sometimes it's hard because, like, I realize, like, just doing the research, it's like, Roxanne Shante kind of, like, started this whole, not started, but, like, played a really critical role in, like, just propping up, like, battle rapping just as a sport, in rap. And so that was instilled from the beginning, like, her and Sparky D having that, legendary, like, war and battle. So it was always a thing, and they kind of, like, welcomed it, and, like, they just wanted to be competitive. But then you had the people behind them kind of, like, playing out in a different way. So I don't know. I can never tell, like, how much of it is just, like, competition versus like just naturally that versus I just really hate this phrase, like, pitted against each other. I purposely did not want to use that in the book.
I like in the book that you called out that early. I like that you called those things out and then just left them from the copy. And even now when you're saying, like, there's a separate phrase for women going at each other, catfighting, or pitted against. And then, I've obviously in my career been
nobody ever uses that for that.
Right. But I think there's this, like, I don't even think there's a conditioning that we've had, and then it seeps into our work, right? And then it's funny because people want to call out media, but you see it on social media, right? Like there's morality becomes, like, weaponized in social media, or not even weaponized. It's just like, well, what about this? And there was a lot of the conversation around WAP, what you call peak, kind of, a peak moment of women's history for the things that it celebrates, but also, like, they're empowered to celebrate it, and coming from two artists that aren't first ladies of crews, didn't have gatekeepers, like, that all the advancements are embodied in all the elements of that song, and yet social media still found a reason to turn it into a morality play.
Right, exactly.
Bizarre.
And then social media. I sometimes forget that word media is in there, and that actually sometimes means that they, people make stories out of stuff that happens on there. Basically, like, in a way, it is a form of media. So, there's always going to be the people watching from the outside who, like, turn it into something else. Because, like, I think I say in a couple, like, there's Remy Ma versus Nicki, and then Nicki versus everybody, and like Roxanne versus Sparky, and, like, not everyone likes everyone, and, like, women are not, like, they don't have to like each other, they don't have to like get along, but I think one, just because there's usually just not a whole ton of them on a really visible level. It just ends up being like, women don't like each other. The women in rap are fighting. When it's like, well, I don't know, like, if they don't like them as a person, like, that's fine. But they are in a business that is, like, competitive, and that it's competitive, like, on record, not just competitive. Like, people actually rap about the competition. So it ends up showing up in their work. Yeah, it just shows up in their work, basically. So, it's a really, I feel like that conversation is like can keep going. Like, that is, like, I'm really interested in, like, this whole panel on that or something. I don't know.
Yeah, no, that's a comma conversation. It's not a period. Stop. It's a this and this and that and that.
Exactly.
So, your book obviously has a lot of historical elements, but, in the end you talk about the future, and throughout this conversation we've kind of been dubbing it the volume. What do you make of the current crop? Flo Milli, Erica Banks, Rico Nasty, No Name, et cetera, et cetera. Just not as an author, just, personal phase. You're a music journalist and you're a hip hop head. What are some of your personal phase of the new class?
I do love Flo Milli. Just like the audacity of, and that's not, like, obviously in a bad way. It's just like, really just like basically the salesmanship of, like, audacity. Like, I like that about her. And also I think a lot of, like Saweetie, I like that a lot of these women are just funny, which is something I've been trying to bring out, is just how, like, another way that social media allows, like, just their personality to flourish in a way that maybe was, you know, held back before in some way. Like, Saweetie can just, like, put out a clip on, you know, TikTok, and, like, you can see that she's, like, funny, and she's funny in her videos, and Cardi obviously was, like, hilarious. And Nicki was funny, and, you know, they're showing, like, humor, I think, is a really, like, kind of quietly radical thing for women, like just kind of being themselves, basically. So like that's what I like about Flo Milli and Saweetie. Tierra is just amazing. Like visually, I don't know. I just like when you can kind of like take your, like, taking like whatever the world that's like in her head and like like spitting it out, and it's like just music video that's like, what did I just watch? And you know, I feel like she can, and I hope she can kind of like blow up in a different way, in the same way that Missy did, basically. Like I kind of want, in the same way that Missy was just like the universe, basically, in the 90s. And like every music video, you were like, all right, like I gotta see that Missy video. I kind of like hope that for her. I don't know if it's realistic, but yeah, I think those are kind of like faves. But I do like stuff that, you know, like Doja Cat and Rico Nasty. It's a little bit of different things for like different, or I like different artists for different reasons, obviously. Like Rico's just kind of sort of punk mentality is really fascinating, and she also has that same kind of just audacity. It's just like I forget the meme, the meme she became, but yeah, I think that will be like my tops.
And then I just have two more questions.
Oh, Megan! Oh my God, I don't know if she's like new technically, but yeah.
No, she's definitely, you know, new class, probably the leader of the new class.
Right.
At the top, I asked you what you set out to write and how, you know, did it become the Motherlode. As a bookend to that question, I'm curious to know what changed for you after having finished the book, in terms of either the perceptions you had, or what you thought you knew, or you know, when you made it through the other side of this reporting and writing, you know, where's your stand now on the view of women in hip hop and history and contributions?
I think that definitely lately, probably like actually the last 2 weeks, I've been thinking about that word contribution, and just feeling like I've been like using it. I mean, you know, in the description of the book, it's like, you know, talking about women's contributions, and I do think that maybe I've been using it like maybe that's like a limiting kind of word to use, and I think a way that I've described it, like, because it's more than they're contributing to hip hop, like it makes them seem like they're just like something they're not a part of. Like they are like creating it, so they're like helping to create it. They're like co-creator. I'm starting to kind of like shift toward using like creators and like co-creators of hip hop, and that's reflected in the subtitle. Like it's why I wanted to say, you know, obviously it's double meaning. Yeah, like they made hip hop, and yeah. So that is one thing I have to kind of making sure that I'm talking about them in a way that's not making it seem like they're just like a part, like just kind of like that they're just kind of like in it, versus like being the ones who are actually moving it along also, if that makes sense.
No.
So that is
perfect sense.
Yeah.
I was going to say it makes perfect sense, and I think that your playlist is such a good
companion piece to the book, because in reading about it and also listening to the records, you hear a lot of the bedrock of hip hop, future and past, and the sound. You know, like
right.
The cheap accusation is like ghostwriter, and like you said, like you know, contributing, but to this thing that they're not a part of, like, you know, these cheap shots. But you know, you listen to the playlist and you read the book and you see that they're clearly there's a case that should be made louder and louder and continuously, how interwoven women's contributions and creation to hip hop is.
Right. Yeah.
And then last question.
Okay, no, sorry. I was gonna say something off the record, so.
We'll get to that afterwards. So last question, then. Finally, past and present, after we got through all this interview, what's your Mount Rushmore of women in hip hop? Your four throughout history, whether, you know, if you have any new favorites that you want to include. This is your personal, not your what you think of as the definitive Motherlode Mount Rushmore of hip hop. Clover Hope's Mount Rushmore of hip hop, women in hip hop.
Yeah, that's good, because like the cover, that was like exactly what the cover image was. I guess like in a form of that. Yeah. Well, definitely like Kim, Missy, Lauren, Kim, Missy, Lauren. I want to put Salt and Pepper, but then that's like 5. So
that's
like 5. Right. Yeah. You gotta like change the statue. I don't know, rocks a little bit. Yeah. So it gets another person.
It's still 4 at the end of the day. So.
Oh, you know what? No. Take that back. Missy, Nicki, Lauren, and MC Shyrock, actually. I gotta put MC Shyrock because I feel like if you're gonna have like a founding, like a Mount Rushmore of, like, you have to put the woman who's like considered the like first female MC. So, and that is also just because I just gained an appreciation for her like after working on this. So, definitely, yeah, that's like my personal. It might change next time somebody, I don't know, maybe someone will ask.
I'm sure
somebody else will. I haven't answered that.
It's supposed to change every day. If you're a real head, it changes every day.
Right.
Well, thank you, thank you for this conversation.
Thank you.
It's a gorgeous book. I love it. You can read it page to page, or you can jump. I've been jumping around. I think it's fascinating. I think the playlist is really a gift in addition to this, so you should check it out. Clover's been on the grind promoting it heavy, so check out her on Twitter, Clovito, Clovito, like Hove. Check out our website, cloverhope.com, and make sure you order this book and check it out if you haven't already. Clover, thank you so much.
Any bookstores. Thank you.
Ready. Clover, thank you so much.
Any bookstores. Thank you.
Ready. Clover, thank you so much.
Any bookstores. Thank you.
Ready. Clover, thank you so much.
Any bookstores.